Following Section 13 of the Local Government Law Number 2, not 2013, I've been inviting the Interim Management Committee, being Jan Taylor, Simone Webb, Steve Greenwood, Rob Jones and Stan Gallo, to address the Council on any matters before it today. I'm also bound to declare conflicts of interest and potential conflicts of interest. The members of the Interim Management Committee have advised me they are not legally bound, but they've also advised me that they will declare any conflicts of interest and potential conflict of interest at today's meeting. So thank you. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges traditional owners as custodians of the land upon which we meet. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging as the keepers of the traditions, cultures and stories of a proud people. I would ask you all to stand, please, for the reading of the prayer. Let us in silence pray or reflect upon our responsibilities to the people of Ipswich. We meet today to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, and to make decisions that promote the common good. Thank you. Apologies and leave of absence. We do not have any. Condolences and memorials. I don't believe we have any. Petitions and presentations. Again, I don't believe we have any petitions and presentations. Confirmation of the minutes of last meeting. Any discussion from Interim Management Committee members on the confirmation of minutes? I resolve that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on to 18th of September be confirmed. Resolved. Item H, the reception and consideration of committee reports. So I think the committee reports, Conservation and Environment, Libraries and Tourism, Arts and Community Development, Health Security, Community Planning, Economic Development, City Management, those 7 reports. Minutes accepted as is, and some changes to the Works, Parks and Sport Committee meeting. So there were words in there about 3 years, which should have been 2 years. We just amended those minutes. I think that was the only change to the meeting minutes. The Audit Committee report is also included, that's right, in the City Management report. Ah, yes. So we've added in the Audit Committee report into the City Management, Finance and Community Engagement Committee minutes. So resolve all those committee meetings accepted. Item H, consideration of notified motions. We don't have any. Reception of notices for motion for future meetings. J, nil. Any questions from that? Nil. Moving on to the substantive part of the meeting, the officers' reports. So the first report we have is standing committee structure. I've got a different order in my minutes and my notes. There we go. Okay, standing committee structure. Who's going to present to the council on that report? No one? Take it as read. So, any issues or questions from the Interim Management Committee on that report?
I just have a number of, well, one query at least. In terms of the committees, the councils that, so who am I directing this to? You, Charlie. I could choose someone. You'll do. The council itself, it talks about the councils that have committees and councils that don't have committees. Then if you go to the attachment, it talks about that a number of the councils have recently abolished their committees. And you're okay. Yes. Right. I suppose what I'm getting at, there seems to be a trend of abolishing committees, and I just wondered, and I just for completeness of my own peace of mind, I'm just wondering why those councils actually have chosen to abolish their committees. Very recently, I think it was Cairns and someone else. And I don't think it's going to have a material impact on this decision, because I think my view is that we do need to go down this path, but I think it'd be worthwhile at some stage for us to understand what is going on in some of these other councils, to the extent that they are, from what I observe, and I'm not, this is all second-hand, that they are moving through a process of abolishing their committees. If we're seeking to position ourselves as a leading practice council, where 18 months' time we'll still end up with committees and the rest of councils are going down a different path, it'd be good to understand the reasoning behind that. That's all. I might just table that as a comment, something for us to consider going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. So I should have talked through the background of this report. Was the council committees. I think that it's a very well prepared report. So I think the officers prepared the report very clear and concise. I think the key issue from my perspective was there is no clear alignment between the current structure of council committees and the business and the strategic objectives of council. And there is no line of sight from the strategic plans, the corporate plan and the community plan being advanced Ipswich, and the operation of council committees. So we're really looking for a structure of committees, taking on point what you're saying, that drives council's business towards achievements of its publicly stated goals. So the alignment proposal in the paper is to align the committees with the Advance Ipswich agenda, which I think makes an awful lot of sense. And it will be very clear to the community what the purpose of the committees are in terms of the strategy of council. And I think it addresses a number of practical issues that are well presented in the paper. There are a variety of other council approaches to committees, as you've said, Steve. So some don't have committees. No one had the number of committees that Ipswich has at the moment, so that's clear. And some councils, to greater or lesser extent, have, I think, committee structures that do reflect upon their strategic objectives. I think this is a good proposal. I would like to, my view is we adopt this proposal and we run with this and we see how practically it works. It may be that some of the committees need to merge, and that may be driven by like interests in terms of papers, or it may be driven by workload balance of committees. But I think it's a well structured and a very clear commentary to the community of Ipswich. This is what the business of council is, and this is how we're going to drive towards our strategic objectives.
Exactly.
Any other discussion from committee members? No? Okay, in that case, I resolve that the report be received and adopted, and there are A, B, C, D, E, F recommendations in the paper. I resolve that they are also passed. Thank you very much. Second officer's report, Ipswich City Properties. So I will declare a conflict of interest in this matter. I'm now the sole director of Ipswich City Properties, as well as the interim administrator of the council. Under the circumstances, it's impractical for me to leave the meeting, I think, in terms of those two responsibilities. Because this is a council meeting, I will conduct my views and my commentary as the interim administrator of the council, as opposed to my role of sole director of the company. And I'll expect you to pull me up if I don't do that in the course of this discussion. Any comments from the interim management committee about that process? Stan?
I think notwithstanding the requirements of the director of the company of ICP and your role as council, we think that the decisions that are made in relation to the activities of ICP vis-a-vis the council itself should be made acting in the interest of the council, ultimately as the ultimate stakeholder and shareholder of the company anyway. So it may or may not being a lawyer, be an actual conflict of the two, given they come together anyway. So I think that it would make sense as an approach for decisions to be made in favour of the interests of council as the ultimate stakeholder in the company.
Yes, so that's right. If my role as a director of that company is to look after the shareholders' interests, and the shareholder is council, then there ought to be the same interests.
It's a cycle. It comes back to the one entity.
I think so. Okay, thank you. So the paper presented to council today is proposing to wind up and deregister Ipswich City Properties. Again, I think it's a very well researched and presented paper, and again, thank the officers for that. Some preliminary comments from me, I guess, before I open it up for comments from the committee is, on page 1 of the paper, it does talk through the original objective of the company, which was to set up, acquire, redevelop, manage, and then sell Ipswich CBD redevelopment. And I want to make the public comment that I'm not against council-owned companies. I think council-owned companies have a purpose and a role, and there are a number of good examples around the country, and particularly in Queensland, of council-owned companies I think do fulfil a useful role. So whilst I'm supportive of the recommendation to terminate and deregister the company for a range of very good reasons, it shouldn't be taken as a broader commentary against council companies per se. So a significant amount of work's been done by council and a various number of consultants. The Queensland Treasury Corporation have been involved in the analysis of this. McGrath-Nichol have undertaken some detailed work. I know the McGrath-Nichol report is confidential, so we can't talk about the content specifically in that report, but I think we can generally talk about the purpose of that report in an open meeting, and I would like to talk, I think, in an open meeting about the broad conclusions that it's supportive of the strategy of deregistering the company and absorbing those operations into council. Queensland Treasury Corporation, Queensland Audit Office have been involved in looking at the processes as well. And KPMG have done some work on behalf of Queensland Treasury Corporation, also looking at the company. So we've had a range, I think, of good governance investigations into the role of the company and the benefits and the disadvantages of retaining or not retaining the company. I think they're well presented in the paper again. So the key recommendation is, as I said, terminating the operations of the company, winding that back into council. The financial implications of that are really, because it's a consolidated group, if the council are paying fees to the company's receiving revenue, council's recurring costs, it's a nil game in that process. So there are issues about stamp duty which may arise in terms of our obligation perhaps to pay some stamp duty. We'll negotiate with the state on that matter, but I don't think stamp duty should be a deciding factor in our strategy about whether the company's appropriate delivery mechanism. So the fundamental long-term benefit of the citizens of Ipswich is this is now a public sector project, potentially a sub-public sector project, delivered by a local government in the classical means. It's a bit larger than some, not as large as others, but probably not appropriate for a commercial entity to be done. And given the context of the community concerns about the transparency of the company, I think we owe it to the community to be completely transparent about the redevelopment of the CBD. If that's a matter of the next paper, and absorb the company, or to close the company and absorb all those costs and revenues into the council proper and make it public. So, discussion?
Just one question. It's probably implicit in the papers, but I'd be interested to know if there were any identified risks in this strategy, and just to get a sense of how they've been addressed and managed, I guess. Obviously, there may be a financial risk there somewhere in terms of lessees or people that have already signed contracts, but maybe just a sense of whether there are any
risks of closing the company as opposed to the CBD redevelopment risks.
Of the whole strategy of shutting down the company, transferring to council. There's obviously legal implications in some of the contracts, so just a sense of whether there's been identified any significant risks associated with that process that need to be managed, or if there aren't any significant risks, then that's fine. It just wasn't dealt with in that way in the papers, that's all.
Yeah, that's right. So the McGrath-Nichol report talks through some of the risks.
It did, yeah, so, which I guess it depends on to what extent you can deal with that, maybe you can't.
In a public meeting, you mean? Or yes, yeah, so my reading of the McGrath-Nichol report and the other investigations done are that those risks were identified and addressed, and there's nothing significant for council.
That's
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 my understanding.
Greg, I'll just, I think the recommendations are good, but for completeness, just in the paper it talks about, and it builds on your initial point about the commentary on other controlled entities in Queensland, and I suppose I should declare well, I'm not sure if it's a conflict of interest, but in being chair of Invest Logan, so we'll just park that there. But and it's not material to the decision. It's just that the page 2 it talks about the McGrath-Nicol report and some of the benefits in integrating IC operations into council, including. Then it goes on. The second dot point refers to the fact the decision would be consistent with CCC recommendations that council-controlled entities be reviewed, including the relevant LGA provisions. That's not a necessary outcome of the CCC. Didn't say bring these back into council. The CCC said to review. That's it. So the CCC findings do not support integrating back into council operations. Just for completeness, I think that's the report probably needs to be cleaned up in that aspect, but the rest is good. Yeah.
That's true. My recollection that CCC recommendations is, as you say, that those controlled entities be reviewed.
Yeah, review, that's
Yes.
it. It doesn't support bringing back to council. That's a key point in the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments from the committee? No? So, resolve, the report is received and noted, and there's 4 recommendations. Council resolves to endorse the winding up and ultimately the deregistration. Ultimately is in there because it won't happen overnight, so this will take some time to deregister the company and integrate the company's assets and operations into council. Resolving the Chief Executive liaise with the Company Director, myself, to prepare the report to Council on the actions required for the wind-up of the company for submission to this Council. Resolving the Chief Executive Officer be approved to attend to any administrative matters to assist in the winding up, the integration of the assets, the staff and other property into the local government entity of Council. And resolving the Chief Executive Officer report to Council in relation to any matters requiring any formal decision by resolution of the Council concerning the winding up procedures. Thank you. The third officer's report is the CBD redevelopment report. Again, thank the officers for a well-prepared report. I've got a rather long commentary about conflict of interest in this one. I'm sorry. Declaring a perceived conflict of interest in this matter as Rambry Management Group Proprietary Limited has been contracted by both the Council and ICP, so Ipswich City Properties, to assist in the delivery of the CBD transformation. From 2008-2012, I was an employee of Rambry Management Group, and from 2009 to 2012, I was a director and an equity holder of the business. All those arrangements were terminated in early 2013 when I left Rambry and joined the state government, and I have no current working relationship with the company at all. I've raised that potential conflict of interest in the Ipswich City Properties Board meeting as the sole director, and the management of the company, as a part of the last meeting minutes, had resolved to formulate operating arrangements and just make sure the decisions of the company deal with that potential conflict of interest. I'm advising today that all future matters relating to Rambry's engagement with Council will be delegated under the Local Government Act to the Chief Executive Officer. So I will have no involvement whatsoever in Rambry's ongoing work or not ongoing work, any contractual, commercial, financial operating arrangements with Rambry and the Council. I am delegating to the Chief Executive Officer to deal with. So again, under the circumstances of me being an interim administrator, I think it's impractical that I lead the meeting on this issue. So I'm electing to remain. And I guess the other potential conflict of interest is the one we talked about in the last agenda item, which is my sole directorship of the City Properties, given that the CBD renewal was a key role of that company. And again, declaring that potential conflict of interest, and again, electing to remain in the meeting. I welcome any comments from the committee about those conflicts, potential conflicts. Okay. Looking at the report. Again, a significant amount of background work has gone into the assessment of the CBD redevelopment. The substantive amount of work by Queensland Treasury Corporation that I'm aware of. Queensland Audit Office looking at the procurement processes of ICP and Council. The department looking at our capacity to borrow and financial implications, again through QTC. QTC have hired KPMG to review the purposes and intent of the CBD redevelopment and to comment about whether the proposal in front of us as a redevelopment proposal actually meets those intents. And I've met with KPMG and reviewed their draft report, which is due out this week, which is completely supportive of the recommendations of this council report, I should say. And the key thing, I guess, I'd like the community to note in due course are the 6 strategic objectives we've set for this project, and they're on pages 3 and 4 of the officer's report. And I think they provide a very clear definition of the council's current intent for the project. And really the first one is the most fundamental, is creating an enduring and thriving city heart for the city of Ipswich. So those of you who've been to the CBD and seen the current state of that, it's a very sad situation to be in. So we do need to create, I think it's in the best long-term interest of the community that we create this enduring and thriving city heart. We need to create a heart, I think there's looking at number 2, that does not compete with other retail-focused centres. This is a civic, cultural and entertainment precinct in my mind. And we need to ensure that we enable the future employers and service delivery organisations in the CBD to grow so that it can be secure and grow. And I'm aware of a number of discussions going on with some major parties about that at the moment, which involves relocating also County Administration Centre to the new Civic Heart. And that brings a significant worker population to the Civic Centre. And the discussions that we're having with Queensland Health about this precinct, which the community are aware of, that will enable Queensland Health to expand beyond its current tight site. So I'm very supportive of the strategy. I think the paper's well presented again. There's a great quote, a supportive quote I should say, from KPMG on pages 4 and 5, which really summarises the content of their draft report. Their support of the process. And there's the tender consideration plan attached. I can't remember whether that's confidential or not. No, it's not. That really talks through the options of whether we proceed with the current 4 tenderers or go back to the market or deal with it another way. And again, I'm supportive of the recommendation that we deal with the current 4 tenderers. I'll make a comment about one of the confidential reports, which is really a report by an industry expert about whether that's an appropriate strategy and whether the 4 tenderers represent good value, not good value for money, an appropriate skill level and expertise level for us to deal with, whether we're sufficiently dealing with the market and they're supportive of that. So, comments from committee.
Comprehensive.
None? In that case, we're resolving that the report be received, and 2 recommendations resolved. We're going to adopt the tender consideration plan, undertake a restricted tender process with the 4 tenderers that are referred to in attachment D for the construction of the administration building, the library, civic space and the car park, as set out in attachment B to the report. And resolving recommendation B, Chief Executive Officer establish a governance structure and processes in accordance with attachment C. I should have mentioned that in the discussion, sorry, that the attachment C is a Queensland Treasury Corporation report on recommended governance arrangements around the CBD redevelopment. We're adopting exactly those recommendations of QTC in that respect. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item M. Consideration on have placed section 6 and 8 of the subordinate local law. There are no matters I'm aware of there. Any other business? Declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.